Post-combine week, March 1st, spring has sprung. Defensive backs are also still springing on my television screen back here. And that was my poor attempt at a joke, so bear with me, everybody. But this is Pulse of the Pack post-combine, and I'm your host. I am Jacob Westendorf, and I am joined by the man who was part of the first ever spring, and that is Jason Perrone. Jason, how are we doing today?
Spring has sprung. It's my old man voice. It's my old man spring.
Well, your
Like to
old
go
man
along with
voice
old
can
man
just be
river.
normal.
No, that's what it's going to sound like in about probably 5 years. So get used to it, everybody.
5
I'm
minutes.
good. Happy combine weekend, my friends.
That it is, and we are joined by a special guest, someone who was actually at the combine, and that is Jake Morley of Packer Report, and a little bit of Arrowhead Pride too, but more importantly, the Packer Report. So one of my teammates here, Jake, how far is the trip from Kansas City to Indy?
It's a 7.5 hour drive. So me and my buddy over at Arrowhead Pride, Kent Swanson, made the trip from Kansas City. Our boy Ross Uglum was waiting there for us in a nice little Airbnb right by the convention center. But I did not factor in that it was a different time zone. So I told Ross to stay up for us, and we'd be there like at 11:30. Turns out we didn't get into like 1 o'clock Indy time. So the boss was not super pleased with me, but we made it through the week okay.
And that's perfectly fine. I'm sure that, as you noted on the tweeter machine, Ross kind of made up for that as the weekend went along. So, real quick, Jake, just kind of, I mean, it's kind of rare. I've been to the combine, but it was a long time ago, and I didn't really know like how to navigate the place, really what to do or expect. So, you've been there. Is this your first time, or you've been there a couple times?
This is my second, yeah.
Okay, so a veteran, if you will, for this. So, what's the layout like? What's the setup like? Kind of take us through the eyes of somebody who is credentialed for this sort of event.
Well, it's really interesting because the convention center in Indianapolis is just this behemoth building, right? And so you walk around it. I got lost a couple times. You get there at 8 o'clock, and so it was different. So what was really different this year, and you'll hear a lot about this because I know a lot of people aren't super thrilled with the setup right now. And the reason for that is because one of the main reasons people go to the combine is because you want to talk to other people that are in the media, that are in front offices, they're scouts. I mean, everybody in the NFL is there. So the great part about it is you go out at night. You know, if you buy a scout a couple drinks, you never know what you're going to hear from them, and so you can kind of start putting together your team's off-season plans, and you can kind of connect the dots a little bit. It wasn't that way this year. It was very interesting because, as you guys probably noticed watching on TV, there were still drills going on at like 11 o'clock Indianapolis time. So it just did not lend itself to being able to go out and doing that kind of stuff. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. I talked to a lot of people that were not very happy with the setup, but whatever's best for the players, if they liked it, that's fine. And I'm sure the NFL is going to make more money doing it this way anyways. I know that their ratings were pretty high. And here's a question I have for you guys. I don't know the answer to it, but what do you think had higher ratings this week, the NFL Combine or the XFL?
Oh, well, I'm not watching the XFL currently.
Yeah, it better be the combine.
I would think the combine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's just vote here. How many people watched the XFL games today, or did you watch the Combine?
Yeah. There you
I
go.
watched the Combine.
I did by default because it was on at the gym and I didn't have a choice.
Well,
Well, that doesn't count.
there you go, Jason. You ruined it.
Congratulations. Thank you for that, Jason. Jake, so what you're telling me now through that whole purpose is you spent a lot of money on liquor for scouts, and you could tell me exactly what Brian Gutekunst is going to do this offseason, correct?
Well, the thing about the Packers, and Packers fans probably know this already, the Packers are not really one of those teams that will talk to anybody. Ted Thompson kind of started it. Goody's not any different. You just don't run into Packer scouts out and about. And even if you did, they probably wouldn't tell you anything. I think it's almost like a direct order that, hey, if you're a Packer scout, you don't go out, you don't talk to people. We keep that stuff super close to the vest. That's why I think it's interesting that all this free agency stuff that supposedly is coming from the combine, I don't know where that's coming from, and part of me thinks it's on purpose. If you know something about the Packers, very good chance they want you to know about it. So, there's no right way or wrong way. Some teams you can totally tell who's going to be where, who's going to be doing what. If you're naive to think that NFL teams aren't talking to free agents already, I got some Kool-Aid to sell you, because I'll tell you what, they are. Those conversations are already happening. Teams are still kind of, stacking their free agent boards right now and talking to agents and talking about, well, what does player X want? Could we fit that into our budget? Would they be interested in playing here? So stuff like that. It's not supposed to happen, and it's illegal, and you can get a big hefty fine if you get caught. I think the Chiefs a couple years ago, for Jeremy Maclin, you guys remember when that happened?
Yep.
Like a second round pick, and how they got caught was absolutely ridiculous. It's almost like self-reporting if you get caught, because everybody's doing it. So it is pretty silly, but as far as I could tell, this year was not that way. There's with the new CBA, that's I think it's pretty much done, is what it sounds like. And then there's a couple pieces, especially quarterback pieces, that I think teams are waiting to see where the chips are going to fall. So I think that's a little bit delayed this year as far as what's going on with that. But as far as specific Packers news, I don't have a lot of stuff. I think one thing that was interesting that I will share, this is not from the Packers. This was from another team. A scout told me that they had Logan Wilson, the Wyoming linebacker, as a day 2 value. And when I heard that, that seemed really, really high. And now you look at what he has done this week, and it makes a little bit more sense when he absolutely blew up the combine. I know teams liked him at the Senior Bowl. So in a roundabout way, I guess you could say that does relate to the Packers, because the Packers are very much in the market for a new starting inside linebacker. Blake Martinez, I'm sure you guys have talked about it. He ain't going to be back. And you're going to see a new face starting there at that linebacker spot, whether it's a free agent or whether it's a draft pick. Logan Wilson's got that big RAS score. Brian Gutekunst loves him some athletes. So he could very much be a guy that's on the Packers radar. He could be on the Raiders too, I suppose, but he could be on their radar.
You heard it here first on Pulse of the Pack. The Packers and the Raiders are having conversations about transactions.
I'm sitting here trying to take a drink and I can't get radar out of my mouth. Goodness. Yeah.
Maybe you've already had too much to drink. Are you all right over there? I know you said you had the Sunday Scaries, but
I do have this Sunday Scaries, so I need to. I'm just sipping on my whiskey.
Jake, quick question for you. I guess I should say Jake number 2. So we don't get confused.
More handsome Jake.
Second. That was confirmed by Twitter this weekend that you were the second most at the. I didn't say that I could be third still. Jake Ogden could be number 1. I never really, I guess, clarified that.
Have to put it out there.
We can't see, those of you out there that are watching this now or see this nice, clean, beautiful finished production, but neither Jake M and I can see Jake W. So Jake M was going to ask you how much of Blake not coming back had to do with his performance in the playoffs, or do you think that, that might have been the icing on the cake, but they were probably, X high percentage already deciding that they weren't going to bring him back?
I think the Packers like Blake Martinez. If you go back to this year, the first 4 weeks of the year, he really played well, and you started hearing kind of some rumblings about a contract extension happening before the season was over. But then, as the season wore on, it's just kind of the same old Blake showed up. And then you start looking at what he's expected to get on the open market. I mean, it's absurd. If someone wants to pay him $12 million a year, good for Blake. I hope Blake gets all of that money, but he's not going to get it from Green Bay. And I think that's more than anything. Because Blake Martinez, say what you want about him, there's not a lot of good linebackers are hard to find in this league, like game-changing linebackers. There's like 3 tiers, right? You got like your Luke Kuechly's, who's retired. Fred Warner's kind of knocking on that door.
Bobby Wagner.
See, like, this is the deal. That's the thing too, is you start thinking about these guys. There's just not a lot of them. And then you have kind of that second tier of that Blake Martinez. And then I'll throw out 2 names that the Packers are rumored to be interested in. Littleton and Schobert. They're not that different from Blake Martinez, truth be told. So that's interesting to me. But I think, and So it's going to be tough. I don't know if the Packers are willing to shell out that type of money for an inside linebacker. And if they do go with one of those two guys I just mentioned, that's not Martinez. Godspeed. I hope you're good. I don't know, but it would be a tough pill for me to swallow.
One thing on that note with the linebackers is, I mean, yeah, I think it's pretty set in stone. Blake's not coming back. You could kind of see interviews from the NFC Championship game where Blake's getting emotional and talking about how this place is special and they gave me my first chance, and everything was kind of in the past tense. So I think the writing is kind of on the wall in that case. You mentioned Corey Littleton and Joe Schobert, guys that the Packers have been linked to early on here. Maybe I'm still conditioned from the days of Ted Thompson. And I mean, I know he took AJ Hawk 5th overall, but AJ was really a different case from the standpoint of that guy was supposed to be a game changer from two different levels of the defense. And he was a freak athlete. And it still really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me how he panned out the way that he did. But nonetheless, I really have a hard time seeing Green Bay spending a premium amount of money on a position that they, quite frankly, I haven't seen them prioritize since 2006 or 2005, whatever year it was when they drafted AJ Hawk. And now there's a lot of people that are linking those two first-round linebackers, Patrick Queen and Kenneth Murray, to Green Bay at 30th overall. And frankly, I really do struggle to see them spending that kind of capital on a linebacker as well. So I say all that to say you got a chance to talk to some of the linebackers. I really do think if Green Bay is going to take a backer, it's going to be in that day 2, early day 3 kind of range, right around where they got Blake Martinez, the round 4 pick that they had there. Who are some of those guys that really maybe jumped out during the interviews or jumped out during some of the drills that you were able to speak with?
Two guys, or well, more than that, like a guy that I really like, and I would break that trend, is Patrick Queen. Like, let me be clear with that. I think Patrick Queen is that dude. Like, I think he could be that game changing type guy. He was really impressive in his interviews, really well spoken. Kenneth Murray is a guy that I wrote about him on my Draft Miss article. He was one of the very first guys I liked. I've cooled on him a little bit. Talking to him, he was fine to talk to, but some middle round guys, to kind of answer your question. One guy that I really like is Akeem Davis Gaither out of Appalachian State. You watch him, and he is, he's a trash talker, he's a tone setter, he's a playmaker. He can do all that stuff. The big knock on him is he's not that big. He came in at 224, 225, whatever it was, but at the Senior Bowl, he was 219, and then there's rumors that he played at like 215 at App State this year. But he was also the Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year, team MVP. His accolade list is very long, and you watch him play, he does not play, and he even mentioned this, he talked about this on the podium, he does not play like a 215-pound linebacker. You turn the tape on, and he looks like a safety moving, but just the way his block deconstruction is very good. His hand usage is very good for a guy his size, and he uses his athleticism to his ability basically to beat guys either to landmarks or be slippery, but he's not afraid to go through a guy either if he has to. So he's a guy that I really like. He did not play the mic in college, so that would be a transition for him in Green Bay. But he's probably number 1 on my list as far as guys that I think would be a really good value, especially because they found out he has a broken foot. That he had to have surgery on. So that he's not going to be able to work out for the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Is he the guy that's having the surgery in Green Bay? Is he the one that's going up to have the?
Oh, that's a great point. I did probably, because they have that foot specialist up there. It's a foot injury. I bet Van Jefferson will probably be there too. The same thing happened to him with his foot. But so Akeem Davis Gaithers, he's a very good player. Someone to keep your eye on. Especially if they can get him on day 3 now with that would be a steal and a half. Another guy that's pretty popular is Troy Dye out of Oregon, is kind of in the mold of that athletic linebacker that can drop. He's played hurt this year quite a bit. And a lot of people are going to remember that the bowl game against Wisconsin where Quintez Cephas absolutely took his lunch on, it was kind of like a crack block, but If you know what I'm talking about, he absolutely destroyed Troy Dye. But that's not really his game. He's a good athlete. Like I said, he's long. He's 6'3" guy. He's pretty well spoken as well. I enjoyed talking to him on the podium. And then another guy that I think some people maybe don't know as much about is Justin Stranad, who didn't actually work out that well today. But if you watch him on tape, he's very natural as a drop coverage type linebacker. Feels very comfortable in his zone. He's got a good feel for it. He moves really well laterally. So three guys that I really like are those three. And then I mentioned Logan Wilson earlier as a guy that I would suggest all of us probably go back and take a closer look at him, just because there's a lot of buzz about him and how the NFL maybe is a lot higher on him than we are. So there's some names just for you guys to be familiar with. And, there's other guys too. A late round guy that I really, really enjoyed talking to is Davian Taylor out of Colorado. His film is not great, but he is a freaky, freaky athlete. A guy that maybe could learn that kind of that nickel linebacker position. And we're talking late day 3 potential UDFA for him. So if they could get him late like that, he is like one of those lottery pick type guys that maybe just never had the right coaches or, whatever the case may be in college. Maybe he can come into Green Bay and flourish. So there's some names for you.
So linebacker is one position a lot of people are looking at. Obviously, wide receiver is another, and this is a stack class, whether it's a need or not for your team. The Packers just happen to have that big need. So we've seen the results now and how they tested, and a lot of the big names have stayed there. When I talk about CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy, Ruggs, then you get into the conversation about Rager, Ayuk, Laviska Shenault. Did anybody, because the Packers may decide, hey, it's a stack class, we're going to wait until later to pick up a guy. So we tend to focus on those bigger names, but did anybody shoot themselves into that top, and I should throw Justin Jefferson in there too, and did anyone throw themselves into that top, 7 or 8 guy list that we have not heard the name of? And then kind of same question that Jake asked about the linebackers. Is there anybody in the mid rounds that you think could still be impactful for a Packers team that needs to probably add a couple of bodies?
So I think you hit the nail on the head with Justin Jefferson. He was a guy that I would have said for the Packers at 30 before the combine would probably be my second target if they are going to go receiver. My first guy would have been Jalen Rager, who I still really like, but he didn't have a good combine. Like, there's no way around that. His 3-cone is completely off the mark for what the Packers like in their receivers. So that's something to keep an eye on. But Justin Jefferson, I used to always say, I think Justin Jefferson is 90% of Jerry Jeudy. He just doesn't have the athleticism that Jerry Jeudy does. Well, he actually tested out better than Jerry Jeudy did this week. So I think he's firmly launched himself into that top 25 discussion. Guys that I think are probably not going to be available for the Packers are like your Ruggs will probably be gone, Jeudy will be gone, Lamb will be gone, and then probably Jefferson will be gone. So if one of those guys falls to 30, I think you have to take them, because they probably shouldn't be there. But then after that, you're talking about guys that are kind of in that second tier. And is there a big difference between taking Jalen Rager at 30 as opposed to taking someone like Brandon Ayuk at 62? Like, I'm not saying either of those guys will be available at either pick, but that's just kind of the way it can go. It depends who teams like. So I could very much subscribe to the, Packers go a different position at 30 and then kind of wait for the receiver class to sort itself out and take who they like at 62. And then I hope they double up in this class, because it is really good. A guy I really like, and he's not a mid-round guy, but I've got to talk about him because Jacob will like this too. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, I don't get why people do not love this guy. He is a freak of an athlete. Seeing him up close in person this week too. Like, he is a man. Like, he is a grown man. And he tested extremely well. Like, I think he's got a plus 9.7 something RAS, which means he's like in the 97th percentile of wide receiver.
99 spark or something stupid like that.
Stupid.
Too.
Yeah. He's unbelievable. And you watch his game, and I've heard people tell me, and maybe they're right, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But they say, I don't see that athleticism show up on tape. And my response to that would be, watch where he's catching the ball. Watch where Shea Patterson is putting the ball on him, and then watch him at the top of his routes. A man that is that size should not be able to have the lateral movement ability that he has. He creates separation on his own. And gosh, I think when he has the ball in his hands, I do see the athleticism, because it's tough he's using his athleticism, in my opinion, to just bring in a crappy Shea Patterson pass, let alone trying to do anything with it afterwards. I mean, but Jacob, you're at Michigan.
This is every Saturday for me for the last 2 years. I fully understand what you're saying.
Like, if you could just put the ball on him and let him go to work, I think we'd be having a different discussion. But he's very much a guy I think could be a lot better pro. So I just wanted to give him some love. I think he'll probably go between 30 and 62. If he's there at 62 and the Packers take him, I'm running all the way to Jacob just to give you a high five.
Well, we just saw the Packers surprise us with a Michigan pick in the first round in 2019. So do they do the same at 30 in 2020 is the question. But it sounds like, Jake, from what you're saying, it sounds like if they like that program in school, and let's be honest, some NFL teams really like certain programs, that could be the case by the time it's all said and done.
I saw someone on Twitter. It wasn't me talking about him, but it was a really good comment. I know this person was trying to be mean, but it was just funny. They said, didn't the Packers already take one underachieving Michigan athlete from last year's class?
Listen, I am not here for Rashawn Gary slander. First of all, Rashawn Gary is going to be good. You're going to see more this year. I understand that he's not some prospect that you guys all wanted, and that's fine. Rashawn Gary is going to be good. So is Donovan Peoples-Jones. And for those, just to add to Jake's comments here real quick, for those of you that want to see, well, where's that athleticism on tape? Okay, watch his highlights returning punts, because that's something where you can see him with the ball in his hands, not having to, like Jake said, slow himself down just to catch a crappy pass. So I'm all with you on Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Good. I'm glad we can stand together on that. And speaking of standing, you want to talk about mid-round receivers. A guy that I really like is Van Jefferson. And I mentioned him earlier because he broke his foot, isn't going to get the test. I think a 4.5 would have been a really good number for him. I don't think he's a burner. Turn the tape on for this guy, though, and he is an NFL route runner right now. In fact, his father is an NFL wide receivers coach, and so when you watch him play, you can see, like, this guy has been receiving NFL coaching since he was a child. That's how he runs his routes. They're very precise. I think he has good feet. He has a plan to get off the line of scrimmage. I think he's a limited athlete, but for a mid-round guy like that, I would love the Packers to go get your freak athlete early, let him develop, and Van can be one of those guys that comes in. He probably is what he is already, honestly. And if that's a guy that catches 40, 50 balls for 600-700 yards, like, that's a good mid to late round draft pick. And give me that all day as my wide receiver 4. So I really like Van Jefferson. And we're talking floor. We're talking floor for him. Ceiling, I don't know. Maybe he is a wide receiver 2. Another guy I really like, I think he's going to be a mid-round guy too, and we're talking probably day 2, is KJ Hamler, another guy that Jacob and I really like. I think he's too short. I do buy into that. I hope I'm wrong. And Goody, Ross straight up asked him this question, and he was talking about thresholds, and he was talking about deviating away from that for Jair. And Jair was close, at least. KJ Hamler, he ain't close. He's real short. But I like it, man. I like his game a lot. I hope teams are not in on him because he's short and the Packers can get him way later than he should go, and they can look past that. But I wouldn't bank on it. The Edwards kid out of South Carolina State, he's real good. I like him a lot. Another guy that's hurt, though, that didn't get the test. He's good. I would have told you Chase Claypool is a guy I liked, but he's probably going to be in most people's top 50 at this point now. Michael Pittman is another guy I really like in this draft class. I think the Packers, looking at their history, the big knock on Pittman is he going to test well? He's a +9 RAS guy too. He tested very well this last week. He's a guy I like. I think the Packers will like him a lot as well. A guy that I don't think enough people are talking about is John Hightower out of Boise State. He's your burner. He is your MVS that hits, hopefully. John Hightower was a JUCO track and field athlete. He was in the JUCO national championship. He was a 400-meter dash or 400-meter hurdles runner. So he's a psychopath. So that's cool. But he's got that long stride. He ran that 4.4 this week. He's a deep threat. Boise State used him quite a bit on those jet action sweeps where they just got the ball in his hand. So he's another guy that I think is being slept on, and in this deep class, someone that you could probably get on day 3 and look really smart. So there's plenty to pick from in this wide receiver class. And as we get closer to the draft, I'm sure more names will surface as well, because I think I'm 32 in, because I do wide receivers for the Arrowhead Pride draft guide. And I think I'm in my mid 30s right now as far as wide receivers, and it's still usually you get to this point and you're looking at bums. You're not yet. These guys can play. You keep turning on the tape thinking, I'm doing something wrong. This is incorrect. I should not have 30 guys with draftable grades and growing. But that's where we're at, and it's going to be that way again next year. Next year's wide receiver class is really stupid good too. So it's an exciting time to need a wide receiver. And if you listen to the Yahoo Sports national podcast with Therese Paylor and Charles Robinson, Therese had a really, really great quote this last week talking about wide receivers and talking about how if you need a wide receiver, if your team is going into this draft desperately needing a wide receiver, Packers, it is their fault. It is absolutely 100% their fault. There should be no reason that you desperately need a wide receiver, but here the Packers are, and you look at their last 3 draft classes, they have not invested in the position, and so we're kind of at that spot. Luckily, there's plenty of value in this draft class, but I think we finally see the Packers pour some resources into the wide receiver position.
Something I think that Ross, you mentioned him earlier, Ross Uglum, obviously, of Packer Report, said that I thought was interesting was that if you take a guy this year in the 4th round in a normal class, quote unquote, that guy's a 2nd round pick more likely than not, or at the minimum like a mid day 2 kind of selection. Jake, we were talking pre-show about, when the Packers have had their needs, and you can see the way the Packers, now they don't necessarily always interview the guys that they want. For example, last year they didn't interview Rashawn Gary, but ended up picking him 12 overall. But they do interview the positions that they need to kind of find what they're looking for. The positions they've identified as need. Last year, it was edge and offensive linemen and tight ends. They took Jay Sternberger, Elton Jenkins, and we know the deal with the Smiths and Rashawn Gary. This year, it's wide receivers, linebackers, defensive linemen, really, from what I've gathered, and some DBs too, from what they had yesterday. But I say all that to say, when Brian Gutekunst has identified a weakness, he pours resources into it. And one year it was Tramon Williams, Jair Alexander, and Josh Jackson in the draft. What do you think the chances are this year? Because the Packers are linked to Austin Hooper, for example, in free agency. If they were to sign him, just for example, what do you think the chances are that they double up in the first 2 rounds, 30 and 62, at wide receiver?
Oh man, I'd sign me up for that. I'd do it, but will they? I don't know. So much needs to happen still with Bulaga. They don't resign him. That skyrockets as far as a need. That becomes like a glaring need for the Packers. So much needs to happen still. They could get, but I'll tell you what, they could get 2 really good wide receivers if they did do that. And you're talking about Aaron Rodgers in his, these are the golden years for him as far as what he's going to be able to do. So if you don't get him young talent now, because the thing with receivers is sometimes it takes them a year or 2 to develop as well.
Adams, Devontae.
Yeah. See, I mean, you could still. That's why I'm not going to rule out MVS. I'm not going to rule out EQ. I'm not going to rely on them either. But they're 2 guys that if you tell me at the end of next year, Jason, hey, Equanimeous St. Brown was actually the Packers' number 2 receiver. He had 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns. I would say, well, he always had the talent to do that. Did he? Maybe it finally showed up. I don't know. But it just takes time. So, and Aaron Rodgers is not getting any younger. So if you're going to get him weapons and you're going to get them to them in the draft, you better do it soon, because a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers, if you take a rookie receiver, he's not going to be able to have that 3 years of chemistry that like he has with Devontae. So you better take him now. You better develop him now. And in the same breath, if Brian Bulaga is not there, you better make sure his butt's getting protected too, because he's not a young guy anymore. He's one hit away, like everybody is. But it's never a bad idea to protect your Hall of Fame quarterback. So
on that note, I mean, since we've talked so much about the positions, everybody, the sexy ones, but linebacker and wide receiver, if
Jason,
Bulaga's
if
not
this is a quarterback question, I'm deleting it.
It's not. I mean, it relates to the quarterback in terms of who's going to protect him. So if they don't bring Brian Bulaga back, or if he gets priced out of what Green Bay is willing to pay for him, the offensive lineman. This is. I know that there's obviously some things that can be gleaned at a combine in terms of their agility, strength. They still run the 40, which is funny to me because. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're God bless you, if you're still blocking someone down the field on a screen 40 yards, then
no, that's the last 40 they will ever run.
Right. So we've all heard Josh Jones's name, and obviously Packer fans are not unfamiliar with that name combination, I'll say, but it's obviously a different Josh Jones. But as far as offensive linemen did, speaking of behemoth dudes, I'm sure you probably saw a few, and they usually stand at 6'5" and taller. So anybody there outside of the Josh Jones, that because Green Bay, they've had a lot of luck in the mid rounds too. So is there anybody catching traction, or did you hear any names that kind of got hot on the offensive line? And that can be either interior or on the outside.
Yeah, I think some names to keep an eye on, like the Josh Jones. And before I answer that question, how crazy would it be if the Packers drafted Josh Jones? There's a wide receiver named Tony Brown, and there's another offensive tackle named Kyle Murphy. So that could be there's a nugget for you. But I think offensive tackles are linemen in general that can be there. Maybe in that second round, I threw this scenario out there the other day because I think a name people need to start getting familiar with is Ezra Cleveland from Boise State. He's a good player. He blew up the combine too. You start asking the question was how many tackles can go in the first round. So he could be a guy that's available in that late second round. A really popular name over at Packer Report, our guy Owen Reese wrote about him. His name's Ben Bartch out of St. John's, Minnesota, where a guy I went to high school with is the quarterbacks coach there. So he's told me a lot about Bartch, and he'd be an interesting guy. I think he'd fit in with Green Bay really well. But I think he's probably going to be a guard when it's all said and done, maybe right tackle. But he does have the short arms, which, yeah, I don't take what you want with that. I do think there's some validity to it, but I think some guys it doesn't matter. There's another name. So another name in the first round is Austin Jackson, the USC kid. I think he could really be that late first round type guy. But then at the same time, speaking of Brian Bulaga, when he came out of Iowa, there was no way, shape, or form he was supposed to be there for the Packers when they picked, and lo and behold, he was. He was constantly mocked as a top 10 guy, and he was there. So when you talk about guys like, Worst is gone. Worst is gone. He solidified that with that combine workout. But maybe a guy like Andrew Thomas from Georgia. He's a real good player. Guys just have passed him this year. He could be there late first round. Mekhi Becton, for everything that he does well on his highlight tape, which is impressive. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Mekhi Becton's the tackle from Louisville. He's almost 400 pounds and around a 5'1". Like, he is a absolute freak show. And you throw on the highlight tape, and he does. Like, he's a bouncer. He throws guys out the club. He's a pancake specialist, like all that stuff. But then also, if you put on some of his inconsistencies, it can worry you. So he could be a guy, maybe potentially, if I had to say a guy might fall to the late first round, he might. You just never really know. And then as far as other mid-round guys, man, I don't know. Like, those are the guys I talk about. And the Packers seem to be really good at finding them, though. Yeah. So I'll say when I watch film, the position that I am least comfortable watching is offensive line. I'm not good at it. Like, so when I watch guys, I tend to fall in love with their workout numbers, and I miss. Like, Jason Spriggs, give me all that. Like, I love Jason Spriggs, and we saw what happened with him. So hopefully the Packers can dig up some guys, but those are certainly some names that I think will be in that range.
All right, Jake, before we let you go, I got to put you on the spot a little bit. So I'm taking this from Ken Ingalls, which is the cap quote unquote expert, if you will. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to him. I just don't know if there's such a thing as a salary cap expert unless your name is like Russ Ball or somebody like that. But essentially, he has stated that the Packers can sign, in addition to a Kenny Clark extension, two big free agents. So one of those, for example, would include Brian Bulaga. Okay? So just kind of so you know where we're at. You're in Brian Gutekunst's chair. Give me those two guys and give me your ideal scenarios at 30 and 62.
Okay. So we're assuming Kenny Clark gets signed. We're assuming Brian Balaga's back.
Well, no. Brian Bulaga counts as a big free agent. So if you, for example, if you want to sign Austin Hooper and Corey Littleton, that means you're letting Bulaga walk.
Okay. I mean, I think that's so tough because if you let Brian Bulaga go, you better have a better plan than built here. I don't trust him as a 16 game starter.
Or Billy
I would
Turner.
love to do Bulaga for 2 years. I would love like that type of deal.
Okay.
So let's say that Brian Bulaga for 2 years, backloaded. Give him all that money next year. And if he can make it to next year healthy, you give it to him. If not, then you part ways with him. Then I would say I don't love any of those free agents. I got to be honest. I don't love any. Littleton is a guy that I kind of bagged on earlier by saying not wanting to pay inside linebackers, but he'd be the one that I would because I feel like he's gotten better every year and he does offer that range in the middle of the field. But I got to help my guy Aaron Rodgers out. I do. I'm bringing in Austin Hooper, so I think I would go Kenny Clark, Bulaga, Austin Hooper. Pick at 30. If I could have anybody I want potentially at 30 in this scenario, I'm going to say even though it's unlikely that he's there, I'm going to take Patrick Queen from LSU. I think he's, like I said, I think he's a dog. And then at 62, I'm taking our guy, Peoples Jones, baby. 62, let's roll.
All right, so there you have it. If Jake Morley was the Packers general manager, they have re-signed Brian Bulaga, which is brilliant, I might add. Jake, I know that you're familiar, but I've been doing these needs assessments over at Packer Report, and I've basically said that the Packers need to find an offensive tackle if Bulaga walks goes to 10 out of 10. That's as high as it goes. I mean, I've harped on this. It's funny to me because I call this kind of the shiny new toy season. And everybody kind of bags on who's already in the building kind of thing. Somebody said something on Twitter along the lines of like, how are we supposed to fix anything if we're not willing to play ball with guys like Littleton or Schobert or Hooper or Robbie Anderson, but we're willing to give 10 plus million to Brian Bulaga? And I was like, well, the answer to that question is because Bulaga is the best player at his position. Just mentioned. Yes,
and
exactly.
Of any of those guys that you just mentioned, like I don't know, like notice how I went through that. Like I didn't discuss, like my biggest issue with Bulaga is like, was this last year a unicorn season where he stayed healthy? You know, that's your question. Your question is not ability. My goodness, he is a stud. He is a stone cold stud right tackle, but he just needs to stay healthy.
And he still got banged up last year too. He just played through it.
And frankly, I think that's just, it's a risk you have to take. A 37-year-old quarterback, and it's just not going to matter how many weapons you add to him if he's on his back. I'm sorry. It's a risk you have to take. Find his replacement in the draft, or try to find it, I guess I should say. Sure. But the idea of going cheap on the offensive line, not the position to be doing that with, especially for positions where it's been proven, one, inside linebacker doesn't matter all that much. Two, wide receivers. I mean, Calvin Ridley stepped in and was the Falcons' second best wide receiver immediately. I mean, there's plenty of examples like that. There's a lot of examples of offensive tackles sucking in their first season. Oddly enough, Brian Bulaga is not one of those, but I don't think you can just kick him out the door. So we are out of time for this. Jake, thank you for joining us. You can find his work over at Packer Report. And Jake, I'm sorry I don't have your Twitter handle recognized because I still think it's Jake Stack, but I don't think that's it.
So I got a story about that. Let's clear the air. So my Twitter handle is at Jacob Morley. And the reason for that is because if you are familiar with Kansas City, there's a very, very popular barbecue restaurant called Jack Stack. And so as someone that covers the Chiefs at Arrowhead Pride, I was not about to have my name being Jake Stack because I still hear it 1,000 times a day. hey, your name sounds like that barbecue place. So it's Jacob Morley. Morley's my middle name, so that's what I go with. I'm not trying to be a diva or anything. I was just that's what I roll with, man. And then you can I mentioned Arrowhead Pride. If you're interested in the draft, go head over there too. We have a draft guide that we come out with. It's real cheap. Buy that, buy the Cheesehead TV one, buy all the draft guides you can get your hand on because they're all fun to read. They're all a little bit different in their own regards.
Yeah, what was it like covering a Super Bowl champion? I guess now that we're at that, I haven't had that opportunity since I've started blogging.
Man, it's cool. I'm
Duh.
sure it's a lot cooler than the Packers. Like, let's be clear, I'm a Packers guy first, but I was really happy for all my Chiefs pals that they really have had a rough go of it. It's been 50 years. I mean, you're talking about quarterback play like Brady Croyle, Tyler Thigpen. I mean, so Pat,
Kyle Orton.
Kyle the Bottle Orton. Yeah, so they've earned it. They deserve it. So I'm happy for them. Now, if they win 2 or 3 more, I'm probably going to get real annoyed, but we'll let them celebrate their one.
Yeah, let them have the one, and then next year, this time, we'll be covering a Packers Super Bowl championship, picking 32nd in the draft. So that is how you follow Jacob Morley. You can follow Jason. He's at Jason Barone. You can follow me. I am at Jacob Westendorf. Thank you guys for listening to this. Combine's over. Now it's really time to start digging in, getting to the fun, and a million more mock drafts between now and end of April when this whole thing kicks off. And the Packers are picking 30th overall, and they probably make you angry because they don't pick the one player that you have your heart set on. So thank you guys for listening, and of course, as always, go Pack, go.